Om Stapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namah. So we are continuing our discussion on this Mahabharata, mostly focusing on the basic values of human life, philosophy values. So we already discussed the Yaksha Prashna, which comes in the Aranya Parva, it's Vana Parva. Technically, it is called Yaksha Yudhishthira Samvada, a dialogue between Yaksha. Yaksha is a celestial being, and Yudhishthira, the eldest of the five Pandavas. So you can see a lot of the higher values of human life, like wisdom, detachment, equanimity, treating everyone as equal. You can find all these great values in the answers given by Yudhishthira to the questions posed by Yaksha. So this is a very, very well-known episode in the Mahabharata. Now, this huge work contains so many jewels of common sense and spiritual wisdom. I want to take up another very, very famous episode. Technically, it is called Anugita. It comes to us, the later part of the Mahabharata text is called Ashwamedhika Parva, and within that section there is a subsection. It's called Anugita Parva. So it's a conversation between a king called Janamejaya and Vaishambhayana. Janamejaya was a king who became the emperor after the Mahabharata war. The whole story is being retold long after the Mahabharata war. So it's a conversation between a great sage called Vaishambhayana and Janamejaya. Now, the story goes like this. After the Mahabharata war, Yudhishthira became the emperor, the king, and then he performed a huge Vedic ritual, Vedic sacrifice. It's called Ashwamedha Yajna. Normally, that kind of Vedic sacrifices are performed by kings and emperors to establish the supremacy among the smaller kingdoms around. So called Ashwamedha Yajna. And the story is very interesting and deeply moving in a way. So it goes like this. During this conversation between King Janamejaya and Vaishambhayana, Vaishambhayana narrates an interesting incident. He says, during this Vedic ritual, a very interesting incident took place. Sruyatam Rajashardula Magada Asharyam Uttamam Ashwamedhe Mahayajne Nivrutte Yat Abhut Prabho. So, O Lord, during this huge Vedic sacrifice, Ashwamedha Yajna, which will be participated by all the neighboring kings and emperors, they will participate in this important Vedic ritual. Something very interesting happened. And this incident is something like this. During this sacrifice, which involved a lot of charity, lot of philanthropical charitable activities, the king who is performing this Ashwamedha Yajna will distribute land, money, wealth, and all the needs of human life among people, among the poor and needy people. So all the people who are in need of land will be given land. Those who are in need of some protection will be given protection. This is an important ritual. And when the ritual is completed, all the priests, the Brahmins, the kings, the courtiers were about to leave, a small tiny mangoose he called, maybe weasel, mangoose appeared. A tiny creature, mostly they fight with snakes, they are enemies of snakes. They can kill even poisonous cobras. A small, tiny mongoose came and it rolled over the ritual, the place where the ritual took place. You can imagine kings and emperors, poor people, Brahmins, scholars will be honored, will be given gifts, and be respected. So a lot of charity is going on. So that place becomes pure and holy. That is the belief. So a mongoose comes there. He rolls over the ground where this charity, all the Vedic rituals took place. And there is something special about that mongoose. It had a blue eye and half of his body was golden. It turned into gold, a golden color. The other half was normal color of the mongoose. And after rolling over, it said, "Oh, this ritual is absolutely trash. This king is boasting that he did a lot of charity, but it's absolutely nothing." So listening to this mongoose speaking, all these kings and learned men, scholars, ministers, they all approach the little creature. "Why are you talking like this? Are you insulting the great king Yudhishthira?" Yudhishthira was the one who performed this Ashwamedha Yajna. So, what's the matter? Why are you talking like this? Then this mongoose tells a story. And that story is a very famous story. It has got deep philosophical, moral value. It says that, it tells a story. How its body turned half golden. As I mentioned, one half of that mongoose body was golden in color. So why this happened? So it tells, long ago, I was one day sitting outside the home of a poor Brahmin, a poor man. He was a very wonderful person, very, very learned, but he was extremely poor. And he never accepted gifts. He used to go every day in search of whatever he was in need of. It's called unchavruti. So in ancient times, maybe the custom is still ritually being followed in some places, but only as a ritual, not as a everyday practice. Tyagaraja was one example who lived in 18th century. Unchavruti means normally it's being practiced by saints and sages and also great musicians like Tyagaraja. They won't keep anything for the next day. So they won't store food grains or any necessities. If they get something extra, they will immediately distribute among others. And next day again, they will go about begging. And that's how they subsisted. Even if they are given gifts of land by the kings, they would reject. So such a wonderful, great philosopher, poor man was living. And it was a big famine in that kingdom, in that village. So people began to starve. And normally his practice was, if somebody gives him something, he will eat. Otherwise, he will glean over, he will search for grains, barley or wheat grains scattered in farm fields. And he will collect and he will cook and he will eat. He and his wife, his son, and his daughter-in-law, his son's wife. 4 of them live in a small, tiny hut. So during this famine, when they had almost starved, they were starving for many days because there was nothing available at that time due to famine. So for many days they starved. Finally one day they got some food grains, the barley or flour, whatever it is. And they cooked it. At that moment, that they were starving for many days. At that moment, when they had just finished cooking, and they served in their plates, and they were about to eat, they were about to say the prayers, the grace. At that time, a sage appeared and knocked at the door. And poor Brahmin invited him inside, please be seated, sir. And please take my share of this lunch food, which already served in the plate. And the sage, he ate it. But he felt more hungry after eating that. And he said, I am still hungry. And then, seeing this, his wife offered her own share of the food. And then the husband protested, but the wife said, no, I can't allow one of our guests to go starving, hungry, so I want to share my food also. So it was served to that sage. Still he was hungry. And then his son offered his share. So each time when his wife, his son, and later his daughter-in-law offered, his son's wife, offered their share, he protested, no, you should not do that, you should not starve. But they insisted that the guest should be fed properly. And what happened was, finally, he, his wife, his son, and also his son's wife, daughter-in-law, all the four offered their share of the food. Practically they had nothing to eat, to the sage who came. And the moment the saint said, oh, no, I am fully satisfied, at that time, angels came and took them to heaven. This is the story, how the story goes. So what this mongoose did at that time, when they rolled over the ground, so there were some food grains left over on the ground where all this happened. So maybe a little leftover, maybe flour or maybe food grains were still lying on the ground. So half of its body turned golden, because the purity, the sanctity of the food grains that this poor man served to his guest is so pure, and that caused the mongoose body to turn half golden. And what happened, this mongoose came and it turned all over this ground where Yudhishthira was performing this important ritual. And nothing happened to his skin. He remained same. So this mongoose says, Saktu prasthenavo nayam yajnastulyo naradhiva unjavrittehe vadanyasya kurikshetra nivasinaha. Tasya tad vajanam sutva nagulasya vishampate vismayam paramam jagmu sarvete brahmana shabhaha. The first verse tells you, the mongoose is speaking. Saktu prasthenavo nayam yajnastulyo naradhivaha unjavrittehe vadanyasya kurikshetra nivasinaha. This poor Brahmin was a resident of Kurukshetra. And he was the one who sacrificed his food, and following his example, his wife, Kurukshetra nivasinaha. Unjavrittehe vadanyasya Kurukshetra nivasinaha. So Kurukshetra is the place where Mahabharata war took place. So this poor man was living in Kurukshetra. I mean, just a part of the storytelling, it comes in Anugita Parva, which is a part of the Ashwamedhika Parva. It's one of the bigger sections. A small section is called Anugita Parva. That's it. Comes to the end of the Mahabharata. To the end. I mean, just before Surgarohana, all this comes, So anyway, the story goes like this. So the mongoose is saying, oh, this big charity that you performed, addressing Yudhishthira, the king, is nothing. Because I was rolling on this ground where you performed all these rituals, you did all the charity, and nothing happened to my body. It remained same. On the other hand, the humble man who offered his own food to a guest, that place was so holy, and I rolled over the ground, and wherever my body touched the little food grains, so it's still lying on the floor or on the ground, that became golden in color. So he says, Tasya tat vajanam sutva nagulasya vishampati vismayam paramam jukmuhu sarveti brahmana subhaha. Hearing these words, all these scholars, the king himself, the ministers, they all came and asked the mongoose to tell the rest of the story. And the mongoose is continuing the story. Finally it says, Sorgam yena duja praptaha sabharyasa sudas tanushaha yathacha ardham sharirasya mamedam kanjanikatam. So this is a complaint for the mongoose. It says, Mamedam kanjanikatam. I rolled over the ground where the poor man sacrificed. He gave his own food to the hungry guest. So it was so holy, so my skin turned golden. But here in this place where you did so much of charity, you fed thousands of people, you made gifts of huge amount of wealth and gold and all that, nothing happened to my body. So charity or generosity depends upon the mind and the sacrifices that accompany this act of charity. So if you are a billionaire and you make a gift of a few hundreds of dollars, it cannot be called a charity. But if you are a very, very poor person and you help somebody to the best of your ability, that becomes a holy act of philanthropy and charity and compassion. That's the idea behind. So this is, you can find many such interesting stories in the Mahabharata. That's why there is another episode that is also very important. Once a king was boasting in his court. Not Yudhishthira, but another king. The Mahabharata contains dialogues and conversations, instructions, and histories of dynasties all over the place, so practically more than 100,000 verses. So in one of the interesting episodes, in a court, a king was boasting, every day I feed thousands of hungry people, my own subjects. So a sage stood up and said something shocking. You are an atharmi, you are a wicked man. So the king was expecting that he will be admired, he will be appreciated. His charity, his compassion will be appreciated by the visiting sage. But the sage stood up and said, you are an evil person. You are the worst person I have seen. You know the reason? Every day you are feeding hungry people. That means your subjects are in need of free food every day. That means you are looting all their wealth and enjoying yourself, leaving the poor. If every single citizen of a country starts depending upon free food from the government, there is nothing admirable about the efficiency for such a governing system actually. Similar thing, you depend upon free food, everything free, people have nothing, then they don't have their own resources. That means he told the king, you are looting all their wealth so that they have to depend upon the free food that you are giving every day. So the sage said, you are an evil person. So there are many, many interesting episodes in the Mahabharata. Some of them are very profound. Look at this episode, for example. Just now I quoted. Not only the mongoose story. The mongoose, so in the Mahabharata, the mongoose speak very, very elite, very elegant Sanskrit language. As I quoted, all these are from mongoose. But in this story you find A visiting sage, a philosopher, was being honored by the king, and the philosopher asked him, this is normal practice in ancient times, you are all keeping well, your subjects are all doing well, your people in your kingdom are all happy, and so on. So in response to these inquiries, the king began to speak. He was very boastful of his own compassion and his own charity. And in the midst of his response, he said, every day I feed tens of thousands of people living in my capital. Tens of thousands of hungry people. The sage said, you are an evil person. I can imagine if you feed once a month or maybe once a while. But every day, your people have to come to your palace for free meal, which means they don't have their own resources. That's not a very nice way of ruling the kingdom. There are many interesting things. Now, again, in the Mahabharata, there are some very interesting episodes. To give you an example, Bhagavad Gita is a very important part of Mahabharata. Maybe the most famous, the most well-known part of Mahabharata is Bhagavad Gita. And I don't have to quote again because we have given many classes on the subject. But it's very important for another reason and very relevant for our context. In the Bhagavad Gita, you find Lord Krishna is instructing Arjuna. And the beginning of the text, in chapter number 1, the 28th verse, that's the beginning of the dialogue which is opened by Arjuna. Dushtvaimam sujanam Krishna yutsum samavastidam sidanti mamagatrani mukham chavari sushyati pepadushyati sarire me roma harsashajayade gandivam samsadehastha tuchaiva varidekhide. 28th verse of the first chapter, that's the beginning. And the last part of the text is Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Yatra Pato Dhanudhara, Tatra Sri Vijaya Bhudit Dhruva Nidir Matirmama. This is the last part. This is not from either Krishna or Arjuna, it is from the narrator, so to speak, Sanjaya. Now, at the beginning of the text, Arjuna is expressing his own confusion, his own helplessness. He didn't know what to do or what not to do. So he is searching for some and answered some of his confusions and questions, and Lord Krishna responds to that, and finally at the end of the 18th chapter Arjuna says Karishe Vajanam Tava Nashto Mogas Midillabdha Tat Prasadar Mayachura Stosmi Gada Sandeha Karishe Vajanam Tava. I'm now quite clear about what I should do. My doubts are gone, my confusion completely disappeared. I shall act according to your instruction. This is how Gita concludes, at least Arjuna's words. Now, so Arjuna became motivated to do his duties and responsibilities. That's how Gita stands. Then there is Anugita that comes in Ashwamedhika Parva. Ashwamedhika Parva it also comes in Anugita Parva. It's a subsection of Ashwamedha Parva. Now, there, in 16th chapter, this mongoose story comes at the 90th chapter of the Ashwamedhika Parva. This comes in 16th chapter. Here, Arjuna is asking Lord Krishna for repeating the instructions that he gave earlier in Kurukshetra, that is Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna's doubt did not disappear completely. He became motivated to do his duties and responsibilities after listening to his instruction, to Lord Krishna's instruction, the Bhagavad Gita. Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, all these taught. Finally, Arjuna learned that he cannot solve the problems by avoiding his duties and responsibilities. The best way to face the problems of unpleasant duty is to do it with all enthusiasm, with all integrity, but without a kind of obsessive attachment. This is Karma Yoga. This is central thesis of Bhagavad Gita, so far as Arjuna is concerned. Now the question arises, Arjuna's problem was solved temporarily, but not completely. Because to the end of the Mahabharata stories, Arjuna again began to express his total helplessness. And at that time, he turned to Krishna. And Krishna said, no, I cannot teach you again. In the Mahabharata battle, the context, the war at that time, I was inspired to teach you all these great teachings. But I cannot teach you again. What it means is, we may learn a lesson and we may be benefited by that lesson for the time being, but unless we evolve ourselves on our own, we won't be able to use that wisdom when we need. So whatever spiritual lessons we learned may be helpful for the time being, but after that we should also strive to grow, to learn more, and to get better established in that ideal. Otherwise, we may forget it. There is such an episode here. Krishna says, Sravidastum maya guhyam jnabidascha sanatanam dharmam surupinam partha sarvalokamsha shashvadan abuddhya na agrihit tanme sumadapriyam naja sa adya punarbhuya smudit me sambhavishyati. So what Lord Krishna says is this. When you are facing a crisis, at that time I tried to solve the problem. But you should have listened very carefully and understood. You may not be able to fully realize, but it is your duty, your responsibility to strive hard and evolve further so that you will be fully benefited by the instructions you receive. That's why Lord Krishna says, I taught you, and but then what happens, abuddhya na agrihi, because you are not very focused, very much focused, so you could not understand it properly. Agrihi yastum tanme sumahada priyam, therefore I am not very happy with you. Nachasa adya punarbhuya smudin me sambhavishyati nunam asadadanosi durmedha hyasi pandava nasakyam punarvaktum aseshena dhananjaya. I can't again repeat what I taught you earlier during the Kurukshetra war. Sahi dharma suparyapto brahmana padavedani nasakyam tanmaya bhuyas tatha vaktum aseshataha. So what it means is, this is a very important, frequently very important part of Mahabharata. It's called Anugita. It comes later. So what it means is, we may learn a great lesson, we may learn many things from different sources. But when we learn, we should also eventually strive to understand the meaning and significance. Otherwise, whatever we learn may not benefit us, may not be of much use to us, unless we make our own efforts to strive and evolve further. After this, I am going to discuss a very, very important part of the Mahabharata. It is called the Mahaprasthana. Mahaprasthana means the great journey. It's called the great journey. It's a very important section. We cannot take one verse after another, not possible. But I am focusing on certain important statements called the text, the original Sanskrit text for Mahabharata, and then we will explain further in whatever way possible. So this is just before the last chapter, the last section of Mahabharata, not chapter, but the last section. The last part of Mahabharata is Surgarohana. That is Pandavas accompanied by Draupadi, they ascend to the heaven. This is the last part. Before that, there is this Mahaprasthana. Mahaprasthana means the great journey. So the point is, it's some kind of it's a closing movement of the epic. That is, it shifts from Raja Dharma, the Dharma or awareness of duties and responsibilities, in various phases of our life. A householder, what he should do, how he should take care of his children, his wife, his parents, and so on. How he should be an ideal family man, husband or wife, whatever may be, ideal husband, ideal wife, ideal son or daughter, and so on. And different duties and responsibilities depending upon your own evolution. If you are ascetic, how you should practice ascetic values. If you are a trader, how you should perform the duty of a trader. So we call it Vaishya Dharma, Kshatriya Dharma, Brahmana Dharma, all this you find. So this particular, it is symbolic of the highest ascent. So the early part of life consists of focusing on dharma and how it regulates our efforts, our actions in pursuit of artha and kama. So dharma as a regulating principle in our pursuit of our needs and desire, fulfillment of our desires. And technically it's called the Pandavas' northward journey. It means when a person reaches the highest level of dharma in his everyday action, then naturally he will evolve to the next level of moksha, amityaga. So you can think of these four values: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Dharma can be considered as a broad regulating principle. And that dharma should be the guide in all our actions, in all spheres of our duties and responsibilities. Now, after living a complete life, doing our duty properly, if you are steadfast in upholding dharma, then as a part of our natural, inevitable evolution, we'll reach a stage that we start thinking of tyaga and moksha. Now, Mahaprasthana is in that respect, it is symbolic of, it's a metaphor for the ultimate human quest for going beyond this world and going beyond everything connected to this world. So they were all Kshatriyas, in this journey you'll find 5 Pandavas, Yudhishthira, and under his leadership, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva. So Yudhishthira and his 4 brothers, total 5. Plus Draupadi, wife of the Yudhishthira, and a dog. These are the 7 people who are involved in this journey. Now here, the dog is not an ordinary dog. The dog is dharma accompanying incognito. And in this journey, one after another, all the 4 brothers and Draupadi fall dead one after another. It is a journey to the Himalayas. And when they reach different phases in their journey, one after another, first Draupadi falls dead, then Sahadeva, Nakula, Arjuna, and then Bhima. All the 6 of them gone. And 5 of them, because the dog is there and Yudhishthira is there. And Yudhishthira and the dog continue the journey. And then Indra appears, some celestial beings appears, that we'll find when I read the text, you can understand. Let us say God or angel appears, the divine being appears. Again, it's a symbolic. And tells Yudhishthira, all your 4 brothers and your wife have already reached heaven. Now you can go to heaven with this physical body. Others had to give up this physical body, that's why they died, and then they reached heaven. But in your case, you can directly go to heaven. And then Yudhishthira said, well, what about this dog? Indra said, no, dog cannot accompany you. Then Yudhishthira said, no, then I am also not interested. I shall be with the dog. If I am allowed to take my dog along with me, that's okay. Otherwise, I would rather not go to heaven. Then the dog appears in his real form. It is Dharma Raja, the Lord of Dharma, personification of Dharma. Now, he said, the Lord of Dharma said, well, I was testing you, whether you are fully established in Dharma or not. That's why I was testing you. So, this is the story. Now I will come to some of the text. I will just try to but some of the verses. The beginning is Suttevam Kauravo Raja Vrishninam Kadanam Mahat Rajam Paridado Sarvam Vaishyaputre Yudhishthira. So this is the beginning of this. Of course, it's not exactly, but I am giving a simplified. Not all the verses are from Mahabharata, but we cannot take the entire text. It will take a long time. So the story goes like this. When Yudhishthira heard about the story that Krishna also had left his mortal body, he also had ascended to heaven. He had also stopped his play. We call it play means for Lord Krishna it's a play. Living this world is a play. He already gone back to Vaikuntha, the divine place where he came from. And there was a big calamity among the Yadavas, that is Krishna's tribe. Then Yudhishthira and the other four brothers and Draupadi, they felt, well, now there is no point in continuing here. So what he did, he installed Parikshit, Arjuna's son actually, Parikshit, as the next king. And then he removed ornaments from his body and he took to some barks, tree barks, skins of trees, wearing these ascetic clothes. So this is the story goes. That is, Raja Paridado Sarvam Vaishyaputre Yudhishthiraha Abhishitya Surajecha Rajanam Cha Parikshitam. So he made Parikshit his next successor, king of his kingdom. And then he himself left everything behind, removed his ornaments, a kingly dress and other insignia, and he took the forest wearing these tree skins. That's how the story goes. Similarly, all other four brothers and Draupadi also Tathaiva Jagruhu Sarve Valkalani Radhiva Harshobhavat Sarvesham Matrinam Gamanam Prati. So what happened? So other brothers and Draupadi also put on these bark garments, and all of them started the journey towards heaven. Bhradara Pancha Krishnaja Sasti Shwachaiva Saptamaha. So Bhradara means four brothers, Yudhishthira and the four brothers, Bhiman, Arjuna, Nagila and Sakadeva, and Krishna means Draupadi, Panchali, and also another one, the dog. Somehow a dog appeared. That's in the original text says, when they were about to start this journey, suddenly a dog also appeared, and it began to follow these 6 people, Pandavas and Draupadi. So total 7. This is what the story goes. So now, here important thing, just a few important points to remember. How they approached this concept of Tyaga or moksha, the transcendental value. This is what is very significant here. In ancient India, the Vedic tradition, how they look upon the ultimate destination of human existence. There is this concept of moksha or liberation, which represents the transcendental value. One day, whatever we consider to be precious and dear and important, it will have to be left behind. So you find in this, when we study further, we are going to listen to that, the original verse will come. See, Arjuna was an important member of this Pandava army, was a brave soldier. Arjuna had a celestial weapon given by Agni Deva, it's called Gandiva, which is the divine, some kind of a divine bow and arrow. A cure in which the arrows will never cease to exist. Endless arrows. And also a celestial bow, that this divine weapon. So Arjuna was very reluctant to give up this. And during this great journey, Agni Deva, the god of Agni, appeared and told him, now look here, this is of no use for you, you have to give up. Arjuna was always reluctant to give up what he considered to be the most precious thing in his life, his divine, God-given weapon with which he could face his enemies who were trying to destroy his brothers and his family and others. So at the last moment he had to give it up. So you find each of them, on the one hand, they had this feeling of helplessness. After the big war, a huge number of people perished, including their own near and dear ones, including their teachers, their relatives, all of them, everything gone. So one day, this body and everything will disappear. So at that time, we should be able to practice Tyaga. You find that idea. In fact, Tyaga is the physical manifestation of Dharma. The ability to practice Tyaga, giving up everything that we actually consider to be the most precious for our life. Without that willingness to give up what we consider to be the most precious thing in our life, we will never get moksha. Moksha means the highest transcendental spiritual goal. You may call it contentment. There are verses in the Mahabharata which tells you that one of the most important characteristics of a spiritually elevated person is he will always have a kind of inner contentment. It doesn't mean that he's always happy, smiling, laughing, nothing. He may be facing problems, challenges, in private life, in public life. But he always remembers there is something precious that is his, and that is ultimate goal, and everything else that we normally consider to be precious in our life will have to be given up one day. So Yudhishthira had to face this reality. Bhima was his dearest younger brother. Arjuna was the most important figure in the entire Pandava family. And his own dear wife, Draupadi. He had no problem giving up any of them. An interesting thing in the Mahaprasthana is, Yudhishthira never cried, never wept, never worried. The story is presented like they are walking, looking northward. And first, Draupadi falls dead. Yudhishthira never looks back. Then Sakadeva, next youngest, then Nakula, then Arjuna, then Bhima. It is said that he never looks back. He was not worried. He continues walking forward. And then, finally, a dog, which is not his brother, not very close relative. The only thing that he cared for was his dog. Like the dog accompanied him all through. And in the story, the dog is symbol of Dharma. So Dharma is the only thing that we should not and we cannot give up. This is an important thing. So when a person upholds Dharma in his pursuit of worldly accomplishments, then that pursuit of worldly accomplishments, upholding Dharma ideal, will inevitably take him to the highest spiritual goal, that is Dharma. So now I am turning your attention to something totally different. I often mention this because the only classical work in Western literary tradition that we can compare with Mahabharata in intensity, in the deep conflicts, in the penetrating, how an author penetrates the deepest levels of human psyche, is Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov and The Idiot. In The Idiot, there's a very interesting episode. Prince Mishkin is the main protagonist. Actually, Dostoevsky wanted to create a character who could be as Christ-like as possible. That character, in a way, he was so good that he proved to be no good for himself. And unless you read The Idiot, you won't understand, because those who are not familiar with the 19th century Russian fiction will have no idea of the intensity of the conflicts that you find in Dostoevsky's characters, especially in the Crime and Punishment, in the Brothers Karamazov and The Idiot. Those who read Mahabharata, especially Karna's story, is a very important thing. Karna is one of the most complex characters, again, in world literature. Much more complex than even Yudhishthira. Karna was every inch as great as Yudhishthira, but he was a very tragic character. Absolutely tragic. Man who had all the great qualities that Yudhishthira had, but he was highly misunderstood. And it was not because of his own fault. He was born and he was abandoned by his own mother, had to grow up in the house of a charioteer, and was insulted and humiliated in the presence of his own friends, colleagues, those who belonged to his own age group. And he was, his honor was saved by the most hated villainous character of Mahabharata, Duryodhana. This is how the story goes. So the conflicts that you find in Karna's character, his own mother, Kunti, who was the mother of all the Pandavas, but they did not know he was the elder brother, but he happened to know. So he had the predicament of having to fight with them. He would have killed them all, but he didn't. He had given word to Kunti that he would, if at all, he will kill only Arjuna. So you can find all these complex characters. Humiliation, inner conflicts, at the same time a strong sense of Dharma, which again becomes clouded and confused, polluted by his own slavish loyalty to a person who saved his honor in public in the Kaurava's court. Duryodhana made him a king of Angaraja, that he was, his sense of loyalty and gratitude, even to a most villainous character. Though that man did that only for his own selfish purpose, but still he could not place Dharma above his own sense of gratitude. So he was practicing a value which was a burden for himself. Now again, coming to subject, in fact that's not the main point. In Dostoevsky's The Idiot you find, Prince Minskin tells this story, the main protagonist. He's telling story of a contempt criminal who is spending his last few minutes before a firing squad. It's called the execution scene in The Idiot. He's an agonizing awareness waiting for his death. And so what happened was, when he was fully aware that he had only a few minutes to go to leave, he's thinking, contemplating with himself, well, what should I do if I have just a few minutes of existence? So what he said, well, then I shall try to repent for anything that I may have done, any wrong action that I may have done, apologize to a person whom I may have insulted, may have done something against a person who may have done some harm. So the episode explores how the certainty and the certainty of death will torture his mind than death itself. So the feeling that he's going to face death, that awareness and the certainty is a much greater tormentor than death itself. So this is how the story goes. So what happens is, finally, if he again gets another opportunity to live, how he will live? What kind of life he will live if he gets a few more years, a few more days, a few more weeks to live? He became a different person. So you can see that there is the potential in every living being, including a criminal, the potential to become divine, to become a better human being, to amend his ways, to repent for his wrong actions, and to refine himself, and to liberate himself from unfortunate, tragic actions that he may have indulged in his previous life. Only he should get another, because he is sure that he is not going to get another extra minute. That's important, because he is so certain. Of course, in the real story happens, the last moment, his execution is cancelled and he gets an opportunity to leave again. So, but again, in this Mahabharata, you find Yudhishthira is marching forward with a smile, certain that his life is going to come to an end, but is absolutely no worry, no thoughts. And that's because he thought whatever he did, even actions that others condemned or others found fault with him, because many of his actions are absence of actions, his inactivity in Kaurava court, and his own lack of enthusiasm in certain complex situations were highly condemned and criticized by his own mother Kunti, and his own wife Draupadi, and his own brothers Bhima, Arjuna, and others, who didn't mince words. But still he had a strong conviction that he was upholding Dharma, even while keeping quiet in the Kaurava court, which actually was not correct. According to Krishna, he was not upholding Dharma as a Kshatriya should have done. But anyway, for him, he never deviated from the path of Dharma. So that enabled him to look at certain death with a smile, with a kind of inner contentment. So he was walking from one phase of this life into another phase of the same life. So death was not a new life for him, not a new experience. That's why symbolically, in the Nilakantha's commentary and others, you find when Indra, some celestial being, appeared and invited him to go to heaven with this body. It was a special favor, because nobody can go to heaven with this body. Everyone has to die to go to heaven. Other brothers did. But in the case of Yudhishthira, he was an upholder of Dharma. So if you uphold Dharma, then even if the entire world finds fault with him, in your inner life, you will be contented. That's why Yudhishthira never looks back. When he suddenly, his brothers report again and again, now Draupadi has fallen dead. He never looked back. Then Sakadeva, Nakula, Arjuna, Bhima never looked back. till Indra appears before him and welcomes him to the heaven. Anyway, the story continues, but I have just touched upon the subject, and we'll discuss that important section in the coming sessions. So thank you for the question and answer. Most welcome. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
Oh, very good. There is a YouTube question.
Yeah.
And it's on the very subject that you were just addressing. Again, you referred to Yudhishthira and how he is to be distinguished from Prince Miskin, from the idiot, because of the depth of the approaches to the challenges of life. So the question verbatim is, how should we understand the flaws of the characters? Should we as humans aim to practice perfect Dharma like Krishna? Is such a thing possible for us? And what is the message to take away from this?
Yeah. In Krishna, in one very interesting context, he defines Dharma as simple common sense. Now, that should be, in fact, that deserves some explanation, Simple common sense, if you interpret Dharma as simple common sense, then it saves you from many flaws, many problems of interpreting Dharma literally. So Dharma has got a universal, transcendental dimension. It also has got a situational and contextual dimension. If it doesn't have a situational dimension, then Dharma becomes some kind of something floating or flying in the sky. We have no access to it. Not only that, that kind of Dharma, which also could mean inaction, inactivity, can lead to hypocrisy. See, civilizations and cultures which have forgotten this situational aspect of Dharma have disappeared. It's a very important thing. I mentioned earlier, Ahimsa Paramo Dharma is a very important statement in the Mahabharata. What does the Ahimsa mean? Suppose you interpret Ahimsa without a sense of common sense, then you will agree with Neville Chamberlain, who is the British Prime Minister, who appeased Hitler, came to an agreement with the appeasement, the Treaty of Munich 1938, which actually was literally the cause of the beginning of the Second World War. Hitler could have been easily stopped if the French and British forces were joined in 1938. And you know what happened? Just a few months later, Hitler completely crushed the entire military machine of France. 1 million strong French military collapsed. And it was not inferior to the French army. So because one man tried to practice Ahimsa. So sometimes Ahimsa without any situational application can be very big liability for civilizations and cultures. So that is why Ahimsa plus common sense. That's why Krishna, I mentioned, I refer to this very famous verse in the Mahabharata. That is, Purvaihi anugato bhavo devaihi asuraghadibihi sadbhischa anugata pantha tas sarvaihi anugamyate. The last statement is that Dharma is followed by all good people, sadbhihi, all good people, idealistic people. What is Dharma? Dharma, that is effective, is an effective tool to resist the evil, at the same time to preserve and safeguard order, peace, harmony in society. Both these are equally important. One cannot exist independent of that. Every person, including Prince Miskin or Gandhi, have failed to practice Dharma without Krishna's definition of Dharma. That means Dharma plus common sense. Because frequently some idealistic people will try to interpret higher ideals, thinking that the entire world is thinking like them. If you interpret Dharma thinking that everyone in this world is thinking like you, first of all, it is a fallacy, it's an impossibility. Krishna knew this. Krishna knew that there are great people in this world, Yudhishthira, Kundi, Vidura, and others. But there are also Duryodhanas in this world. So that is also part of the God's creation in this part of the same scheme. So that's why without a situational application, Dharma can be liability. Actually, it was never successfully implemented anywhere in the world. Nowhere in the world, in the history of the world, was Dharma interpreted as ahimsa literally. It is never practiced. I mean, somebody like Buddha did, Christ did, Gandhi did, wonderful. But then you don't find anyone following them literally. Their teachings inspired people. They inspired and guided humanity for thousands of years, Buddhism or Christianity or Jainism or Vedanta, Vedic tradition, so on. But you don't find the entire humanity practicing that. So very often when we interpret Dharma in very universal sense, we imagine that the same quote can be okay for everyone. Everyone doesn't have the same height and the same body size, So quote has to be different. So that's why Krishna knew this complex problem. The universal and the situational. Both should be taken into consideration. That's why Dharma interpreted as simple spiritual common sense.
Thank you, Maharaj. That is very clear. Permit me to add that I've seen that situational aspect in many cases, including when mothers go into schools or bureaucracies saying, well, we understand the universal rule, but I'm trying to protect my child. I mean, have some common sense about the situation that we're in right now. And, it's not one size fits all, is it?
Yeah.
So it's very clear to many people how that works, but not always at the right time.
Hello, Swami. My question is, if Arjuna had the vision of Krishna, how could he fall back? That seems like that would be like tantamount to samadhi or something.
Yeah. I shall explain. So, if you go to a reservoir, a lake, to bring water, the amount of water you can bring depends upon the size of the vessel that you have in your hand. If you had a big bucket, you can have a big bucket full of water. If you have a tiny cup, that much. So Arjuna is not portrayed in the Gita as a great spiritual seeker. That's a very important thing. Arjuna is not the archetypal spiritual seeker. Arjuna represents the common man living in this world with all his problems, complexities and conflicts and dilemmas. That's why Gita is very relevant. If Gita were preached to a very great spiritual, another great man, it would be of no use to the common humanity, to be very frank with you. Gita is a manual. So, if I could give an example, Krishna never begins his discussion, his exposition of Karma Yoga with a call for practicing Nishkama Karma Yoga. No. The first instruction is, you do your work. If you don't do your work, people will make fun of you, they will laugh at you, they will mock at you. Akirtim chabibhudani kadayisindite avyam sambhavidasya akirtihi marana adarichade bhayant ranat ubaradam mamsindetva maharadha yesham chatvam bhumado bhutva yasisi laghavam. In the second chapter, the first beginning, you find not the beginning verse, but later, you find Krishna tells, if you run away from battlefield, your friends will laugh at you. Your enemies will insult you, will humiliate you, will mock at you. That is worse than death for a person who has a good name. The literal meaning is, suppose you have a good name as a reputation, and then you get a bad name, is worse than death. For a Kshatriya, you have to remember. Now, suppose you are a great mathematician, and one day something happens, you don't know even how to count. You can imagine that's a terrible thing, unthinkable. So Krishna first tells Arjuna, do your duty. If you cannot do it without detachment, do it with all ambition, all desire. Do that. That's what he says. That's the first stage. Sakama karma is the first lesson. That means action with desire, action with enthusiasm. Because that represents Rajoguna. Tamoguna means inaction, inactivity, ignorance, and hypocrisy. And Krishna tells another important thing. Nobody can keep quiet in this world. Nahi kashikshanamabhi jadu tishtati akarma kriti. Karyadehi avashak karma sarva pragadyehi gunaihi. No one can keep quiet in this world physically and mentally all the time. So Krishna knew the human psychology. So what he says, do your duty. And then he says, well, after that, if you have any disturbance, do your duty without any attachment. Next stage, not the first stage. So the point is, Krishna's approach was so realistic. He tells, if you suddenly tell somebody to practice karma yoga, there will be total confusion in their voice. You can imagine, suppose students struggling hard to get a higher grade in examinations, working day. You tell him, oh, don't worry about the result. A student, let's say average human being, a businessman, professional, who is working hard to get promotion, to improve, get a better job, to get a higher grade in examinations, so he can get a good future. You tell him, don't worry, don't have any ambitions, you be detached. It will be suicidal for him. You'll be doing a dead disservice. You can tell that to Gandhi, but unfortunately, the entire humanity it doesn't consist of Gandhis. It doesn't happen. Krishna knew this. That's why Krishna was a world teacher. A world teacher has to give something which will be applicable even to a beginner in spiritual life. A world teacher. And in his higher sense, it will be applicable for the highest person. That is why Krishna was a word, Achinodigi Shastrani Acharya Sthapayatevi Swayam Acharya Chabi Tasmat Acharya Uchare. Who is an Acharya? It's a world teacher. A world teacher is somebody who gives something. Well, you also find something very useful in Gita. And Einstein also found something very useful in Gita. Oppenheimer also found something very wonderful in Gita. Even Emerson found something very interesting. They don't belong to the same category. The same code won't be okay for every one of them. So that's why even agnostics can read Gita. Because if you practice, for example, Karma Yoga of Gita, you can work, your anxieties and worries will be a drain on your energy resources. So you can work without wasting energy and time and inner all mind always complaining, worrying, and being anxious. That problem can be avoided if you follow the message of Gita. So Krishna is talking to an average person living in Silicon Valley, working in Intel or Oracle. He need not go to a temple to practice Gita. That's a very interesting thing. Krishna doesn't expect Arjuna to go to a temple every day. Not at all. Or pay to the priest. Not at all. You can be in your laboratory and practice Gita. You can also teach a great spiritual person, also the same thing. That's the idea. Thank you for the question. Thank you very much.
Maharaj, another YouTube question.
Yeah.
Goes like this. If a wealthy person is doing charitable work, does that not bring any punya to that person?
Oh, no, that's not what I meant. That's not at all.
Think so.
Absolutely, absolutely. No. What I meant to say, was this. See, the whole purpose of the story is, the amount of inner renunciation, the intensity of compassion, that is emphasized here. It doesn't mean the rich man's charity is no charity, not at all. So, these stories do have certain focus points, that we should keep in mind. So, Yudhishthira was the great king, he was a great charitable king, he was a great man, highly recognized. But the story says something more important, because a humble man's willingness to give up everything, including his own life, welfare of his own, finally the whole family died. That's how the story goes. The entire family, the old man, his wife, his son, and his daughter-in-law, all of them died. That's the end of the story of in the Anugita, which I referred to. The story, Mangu's episode, Mangu's episode, Bisu episode. So the point is, they all perished, and that place became holy because the place of great charity. That's all.
Maharaj, the way you portrayed it, the vain leader is boasting about feeding his subjects when they're starving because of his oversight.
Yeah.
And so the vanity and the hypocrisy of that is called out,
Yeah.
which is a very, very poignant story.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Maharaj, I have a question,
Yeah.
and today in our calendar in this location is the winter solstice.
Yeah.
And it gave me a thought about the time frame in the epic, and I'm interested in the Vedic time systems and how they are relevant to our understanding of the epic, and the way that I see time utilized in narratives in the Sanskrit literature is very interesting to the Western mind.
Yeah.
So can we maybe get some insight into that, especially at this time of year, how Vedic time systems inform the Mahabharata?
Well, I don't know anything about that time aspect. Only according to the conservative historians, according to their school, they're more or less agreed upon by many historians. The time frame with 3200 BC is the year of Mahabharata war. That's the conventional date. But the recent excavations in those places, some of the places associated with the Mahabharata episode, have shown that it may be around 3000, 4000 BC. Beyond that,
my question is about the narrative. So if the approach to time, Dharmic time, Brahmanical time, is non-linear in many cases, there are various...
Oh, yeah.
So that does kind of, inform a non-linear narrative in an epic like the Mahabharata. It seems consistent with the Vedic time systems, but I'm still learning about that.
Yeah, you mean this Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara that you're talking about?
Yes.
Oh yeah, in fact that's true. It's relevant in Mahabharata because after Krishna's disappearance, Krishna's giving up his physical body, that is the beginning of Kali Yuga, the end of Dwapara Yuga and beginning of Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga, we cannot define it except saying that adharma will be in ascendance, and dharma will be decreasing. That's one important characteristic of Kali age. So, and it's supposed to last thousands of years, 5,000, 6,000 years, according to some calculations. So Krishna's disappearance marks the beginning of Kali Yuga and the end of Dwapara Yuga. Before Krishna, Treta Yuga was Rama, and before that Satya Yuga. So Satya, Treta, Dwapara, Kali. Dwapara Yuga comes to an end with Krishna's demise.
Maharaj, what appeals to me, and I'm still exploring this, is the cyclic nature of time.
Yeah.
And the fact that, in the West there's that linear nature of time. They wrestle it down to 2025. They measure it only pretty much in that one calendar way.
Yeah.
And we celebrate the solstice, of course, which is astronomical, cosmos. But in an epic like the Mahabharata, time has a different treatment, and I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah. One thing we can say, Mahabharata and Ramayana, all these ancient epics and Puranas in general, they always talk about the coming back of the past in another form. And whatever we are finding today have been here earlier sometime in the past. It's not something new. And it will not be something, it will not be end of anything, it's not beginning of anything. The idea that everything is in cyclic order. The cosmological movement is in cyclic order. So everything will come back, everything will go back and coming back. This is if you think in terms of the entire universe, how long the present situation will last, let's say, even temperature, for example. I think global warming or maybe possibility of a nuclear extinction in the entire humanity, all these things are not entirely myth nowadays. If you read social media and newspapers, you can find people talking about this. It can be totally mythological or so unrealistic. So if that happens, the world that we know today will come to an end. But then maybe after millions of years, maybe thousands of another world order can come into existence. So there were similar situations in the past also. If you read about the Atlantis civilization, that will take us to a world of imaginations, and which I don't want to enter into because yeah.
What's appealing about that is that it's both humbling and encouraging in terms of seizing the opportunities that are here.
Yeah, if you are a student of history and civilizations, then it's very, very promising. It's very reassuring because nothing is going to be destroyed for all time, eternally. Everything is going to come back, you can find. And what I am fascinated is, in some of the ancient civilizations, they believe in some higher ideal which they believe will be always there to guide humanity, the way it's happening now or in future. There's always a higher ideal that searches for something transcendental that is always behind any solid, refined civilizational paradigm. That is no doubt about it. Look at Arjuna, so look at Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira is absolutely undisturbed. Mahabharata war, well, it happened. He is not looking back. All those whom he loved or who loved him, they were falling dead one after another. He never looks back. Finally, the divine being appears before him, welcoming him to heaven. And then also he is not excited. And his only request is that dog also should be allowed to come along with him all the time, like a companion. So there is a deep humanism about it, and also that the upholding Dharma, which gives him a kind of spiritual courage. That's what I am trying to emphasize in this. If you go to cosmology or cosmogony and time, space equations, there are many people who will tell you that the world was there like this sometime in the past. It will disappear again. It will reappear sometime like this. You can find in Swami Vivekananda's complete works. You find you were here before this time, and you will be here again. So this conversation took place in America when Swamiji was talking to his American disciples, Swami Vivekananda. This is not the first time you are here. and this won't be the last time you are here in the past. So you can find this cyclic rotation, the cyclic movement of time-space equation you find. That may not be pure myth, but then that belongs to another realm of speculation. So that's the idea behind. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj. Now,
Swami, is that raises an interesting point about animals. I remember that Swami Vivekananda was very fond. He had a goat and dog and Sri Ramakrishna, and he got into fights with Swami Brahmananda because his goat would eat Swami Brahmananda's garden, and they would argue. And I remember Sri Ramakrishna giving a cat and kittens to a devotee and say, "Take care of them because they sought refuge in me." What is it seems that animals had a very special place, in these great saints. I'm just curious if you could speak to that. Is that because Yudhishthira didn't know it was a dog? It was a Dharma. He thought it was a dog, and it seems like. Could you speak to that? It seems like these great saints have a reverence for animals.
Yeah. Even in the different animals were used. The names occur in many of the parables, in many of the illustrations in the Upanishads. For example, in the there is a Satyagama Japala episode in Chandogya Upanishad. A little boy was instructed by his guru. The boy approached him for learning the Vedas, spiritual philosophy, spiritual things. But then the teacher did not teach him explicitly anything, but asked him, "You take care of these 400 cows. When the total number reaches 1,000, you can come back." So what happened, they were all very famished, unhealthy animals. So with great attention, the great Shraddha, great sense of sanctity, great respect and reverence, he took all these 400 cows and took care of them, bathed them, fed them, milked them, everything he did. And eventually, after several years of hard work, the total number reached 1,000. When that happened, immediately one bull came and he thought that the bull was saying some higher philosophy. When he was in the evening, night, we were lighting a fire in the forest region. Then the fire, he felt that the sound was coming from the fire, saying something spiritually very significant. So also a bird came. So you can find a bull, a bird, a fire, all these. So you can find different creatures from the animal kingdom. You can find these illustrations in many of the Upanishad stories. But the point is, the real teaching came from within himself. He took care of the cows so well, and in doing his duty with so much of care and attention, deep reverence for his teacher, what happened was that changed his mind. And his mind itself discovered higher truths. So he felt the sound was coming from the fire, or from the bird, or from the bull. No, it's a fact. It's not a myth. When we do our duty, whatever that may be, with total sincerity, without any selfish motive, selfish attachment, what happens is our own mind begins to generate some higher spiritual qualities. Look at Goodwin. Goodwin, a good example. An Englishman who is a stenographer. He was not a Vedantin, but he began to, as he started listening to Swami Vivekananda's lectures and started doing stenography, shorthand, what happened was something began to happen in his mind. He was so much of sincerity in it. Swami Vivekananda says. And what happened? Our own mind becomes our teacher. then the mind begins to feel a teaching is coming from trees and mountains and valleys. That's if you read I don't compare Henry Thoreau to Goodwin, because Goodwin had the company of a great saint. But Henry Thoreau's Walden, if you read, you find many spiritual ideas coming from him. He speculates about the intrusion of modern technology, how it could disturb humanity, human civilization. Higher ideas, spiritual ideas. Where was he learning all this? The trees were talking to him as he moved from place to place. The lake, the waters, sky were talking to him. So we can self-discover with the help of our own mind many great things. Because nature is an open book. Our mind should be able to connect with the nature the right way. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you everyone, thank you, namaste. Happy New Year, Happy Christmas. Okay, right. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.